보니까
네.
그런 게 아닌가. 야.
저희 어머니가 룰을 만드셨는데
아,
여기 하도 그 선수촌에 선수들이 많아가지고
예.
아직 우리도 여기 쓸 수 있냐, 사인할 수 있냐 했을 때
네네.
저희 어머니가 금메달을 따야지만 여기 서명을 할 수 있다, 사인을 걸 수 있다. 그래서 그때부터
아무나 못 건다.
네.
야.
그래서 선수분들이 여기 사인 받으려고, 사인 올리려고 금메달 따서 왔어요. 이런 분들이 되게 많았어요.
오기가 생겨갖고 내가 이 사인 여기
네.
분식집에서 내가 건다 해갖고
여기 무조건 걸어야겠다.
어머님이 이 분식집만의 사인의 국룰을 만드셨네. 야, 그 좀 뿌듯하실 것 같아요. 그런 좀 귀한 아주 유명인 스타분들부터 해갖고 유명한 선수, 운동선수분들이 많이 오고 가시고 그래서 뿌듯하실 것 같은데 더 뿌듯하신 거는 제가 봤을 때는 이렇게 부녀 관계가 제가 알기로는 또 3대째 이어서 이 가게를 운영하시는 걸로 알고 있거든요.
대학원까지 나와가지고 자기 진로가 있었어요. 그런데 이제 그거를 어떤 계기가 돼서 여기 가게를 도우러 나왔다가
네.
결국 오늘까지 눌러 앉게 돼버렸는데 그 이유는 그런 것 같아요. 이제 하루 이틀 했던 장사가 아니고 가게가 아니기 때문에 나름대로 좀 사명감이나 뭐 소명을 가지고
네.
이렇게 장사를 이어오는 거 아닌가 하는 그런 미안함과 또 뿌듯함이 좀 같이 좀 있는 그런 기분이죠.
With heartfelt hospitality day after day, 3 generations have welcomed guests for over 50 years. Notably, this snack shop, located in a university district, has also served as a messenger of love among students.
넘겨보겠습니다. 야, 이렇게 메모들을 많이 했네. 아니, 재무이사 명함까지 붙여놨어. 여기 옛날에 이제 아주머님이 이제 계셨을 때 10학번 주인 아주머님 따님 목소리가 참 예쁘세요. 따님 목소리가 참 예쁘셨다고. 야, 따님한테 약간 흑심을 가지셨다. 야, 여기 또 편지를 쓰신 분도 있네, 장문에.
It was a letter from someone who returned to this place after 25 years. Wow, how grateful they must have felt for still staying in business.
365일 캠퍼스에 품어져 나오는 사랑의 향기. 사랑에게 대학생은 어떤 존재인가?
Perhaps this place is where the history of the town is truly encapsulated.
사장님 잘 먹었습니다. 네, 또 올게요. 네. 네, 감사합니다. 네, 또 올게요. 예.
The next destination is Kaur Village in Sangye-dong, nestled beneath the slopes of Suraksan Mountain, which got its name because it resembles a crescent moon. In this village, which exudes a sense of peace and warmth, I met a longtime resident. Miss Kim Yoon-hee suddenly fell in love with the scenery of her village one day and decided to become a village guide who explores every corner of the neighborhood.
오래된 아파트도 보이고
네.
이 저희가 지금 걷고 있는 이 거리 자체도 과거에는 어떤 길이었습니까?
있어요. 80년도 초까지 그 전까지는 여기가 다 가련천이었어요.
가련천.
네, 여기서 옛날에 우리 천상병 시인 아시죠?
네네네.
네, 그 시인이 여기서 살고 아침마다 산책을 했던 길이고 저기 정자도 있죠.
네네.
정자도 있고 해서 이 길은 옛날에는 진짜 마을 사람들이 거의 토박이들이 많이 살았어요.
She mentioned that there's a meaningful space in the village she really wants to introduce, so we went there to check it out together.
저거 한데.
아, 보이네요. 이거 조금만 더 가면 됩니다.
그래요?
Surrounded by Suraksan Mountain and high rises, there stands a serene old hanok that seems to have preserved its charm over the years. It feels as if time has momentarily stopped here. This old house, estimated to be over 100 years old, was moved to its current location in the mid-1950s and has been well preserved ever since.
여기 문이 열려 있네요.
네.
들어가도 되지?
계신가요?
네.
안녕하세요.
네, 들어가도 될까요?
잠깐 좀 실례 좀 하겠습니다.
네, 들어가 보겠습니다.
예. 아유.
들어오시면은
예.
네, 안녕하세요. 네.
Park Young-chun, who has been living in this village for 10 generations. This place is not only cherished by Park's family, but also serves as a space, history, and source of pride that the residents of this village wish to preserve for a long time. I had a moment to chat with Mr. Park, a proud keeper of his home.
주인분의 이제 부모님 세대까지 같이 함께 다
예.
이렇게 계속 조금씩 옮겨 다니시긴 했지만 이게 끝까지 이렇게 그 아버님이 사셨던 이 집, 이 고택을 끝까지 보존하고 재현하신 우리 집 주인분께서의 어떤 특별한 이유가 있으실 것 같아요. 뭐 의미도 남다르실 것 같고.
뭐 일단은 부모님이 오래 사셨고
네.
그리고 저희 형제가 여기서 다 태어나고 성장했으니까는 그리고 아버지가 돌아가신 지가 한 5년 정도예요.
아, 얼마 안 되셨네요.
예. 그만큼 오래 살았으니까는 예, 제가 이제 형제도 여기서 다 낳고 태어나가지고 뭐 그런 어떤 애정도 있는 거고
그러실 것 같아요.
예, 뭐 이래저래 현실적인 상황도 있고 그래가지고
네.
어떻게 보면 유지하고 있다고 봐야겠죠.
그러니까 이거 그러니까 당시에 이걸 다 옮기실 때는 사람이 다 일일이
그렇죠. 예, 뭐 우마차가 있다고 하더라도
어...
그 우리가 그 당시 마차가 많이 발달이 안 됐을 거야 아마.
네. 뭐 지게라도 뭐 이렇게
지게가 가장 만만하죠.
그렇죠.
예, 저도 추측해 보면 뭐 요즘 뭐 조선 말기 구한말 TV에서 필름 보고 그러면은 뭐 다 그냥 뭐 술에 짊어지고 아니면 들것. 저도 약간 상상이 안 가요. 예, 자세한 얘기는. 예. 근데 아무튼 사람 손으로 다 했지 이걸 뭘 기계에 뭘 힘을 빌어서 옮겼다는 거는 전혀 예측할 수 없죠.
A place filled with love and care where no corner has been untouched. The wooden beams and stone rafters are said to be over 100 years old, beautifully preserving the charm of the past.
그 주춧돌이 다 높이가 다르다 그러더라고요.
네.
저도 몰랐어요 그거는. 근데 한옥 전문가분이 오시더니
네.
그러고 보니까 높이가 진짜로 다 다르더라고요.
네, 달라요.
네.
다 이유가 있겠죠.
네.
높이도.
네.
네, 그러한 지진.
얘 돌의 크기가 다르고 돌의 모양이 다르거든요. 그래서
네.
이 나무를 다룰 때 돌의 모양을 보고 구멍을 판 다음에 그 구멍 모양대로 나무를 파서 박아 넣어요.
네, 완전.
우리 레고처럼 끼우는
네.
것처럼.
짜맞춤.
그래서
네.
얘를 아무리 흔들어도 얘는 쓰러지질 않아요.
네.
그래서 우리나라에 지진 있는 데서는 이런 공법으로 해야지만 더 오래 가고 더 견딜 수가 있는 그런 걸 한 거 보면은 이 집이 옛날에부터 상당히 재력도 있고
네.
위에서 보면은 밑에 아는 사람한테 더 위험을 보이기 위해서 그런 생각으로 이 집을 제일 처음부터 짓지 않았을까 하는 생각이 듭니다.
And he carefully unfolded a cherishedly kept 상냥문. It contains detailed records of when the house was newly built or renovated, along with the history of those changes.
들었는데 오늘 보니까 와 글씨도 잘 써 있고요. 이게 그대로 이렇게 보존돼 있다는 게 여기 얼마나 많은 이야기가 들어 있을까? 와 이거 좀 밝혀지고 싶고 감격입니다.
네, 대단합니다.
네 오늘 너무 좋습니다.
야, 그러니까 이거를 이제 해석을 하면 이 집에 이 고택 100년 된 이 고택의 역사와 이제 숨은 비밀을 알아낼 수 있는 거죠. 야.
This place holds not only its long history, but also the lifelong footprints of his parents and everything he has experienced growing up. Even as time and landscapes changed, Park Young-chun and the residents wish to preserve the unique spirit and long history of this place, hoping it will be remembered for years to come. The next destination is Yangji Village, a charming hillside neighborhood behind Danguge Station, nestled at the foot of Suraksan Mountain. A path filled with traces of life, presenting a stark contrast to the tall buildings in the distance. It's a scenery where the lives and times of the residents are beautifully intertwined.
야, 이 밑에 이제 저희가 역을 지나서 이렇게 올라오기만 해도
네.
이런 풍경이 펼쳐질 줄 상상도 못했어요.
예, 저기 바로 밑에가 단고개역이었는데 단고개역에서 불과 한 5분만 올라오면은
네.
이렇게 공기 좋고
네.
아주 지금으로 봐서는 전원 주택지 같은 그런 곳이 이런
네.
마을이 여기에 숨어져 또 있어요.
예, 이런 좀 가파르지 않고 완만한 언덕에 이렇게 마을이 형성되어 있는 게 참 신기한 것 같습니다. 제가 이렇게 저도 이제 예전 동네 그 골목을 많이 이렇게 돌아다니다 보면은 참 느끼는 게 뭐냐면 정감이 가고
네.
시간의 그 마을의 흐름을 알 수가 있고
네, 네.
사람의 손길이 닿지 않은 곳이 없다
네.
그런 느낌을 많이 받을 때가 있거든요.
네.
야, 근데 이 양지 마을은 어떻게 형성이 된 건가요?
글쎄 양지 마을 이름부터가 참 양지 좀 음지보다는 양지 느낌 있잖아요.
그렇죠,
햇빛이 바르고 이 바른 것이 지금 건물들이 거의가 다 단층 건물이고요.
네.
60년대에 서울 도심지에 살고 있던 사람들을 그냥 도시 밖으로 내보내는 정책이 있었어요.
네.
그때부터 시작해서 이 상계동이 그 집단 이주 지역이 많은데 그 중에서도 가장 먼저 여기가 형성됐고요. 67년도에 이제 낙원 시장 있는 데서 정화 작업을 하면서 여기에다 집단 이주를 시켰어요.
As I took a leisurely stroll around the village, I could strongly sense the aroma of life here more than anywhere else. Although many nearby hillside neighborhoods are undergoing redevelopment, and this place may also change in the near future, the residents continue to live their daily lives with hard work and find joy in the little things.
골목길은 정말 좁은데 서울에서는 보기 힘든 그런 좁은 골목길이에요. 야, 이런데
어딘가 왠지 여기는
네.
첫 시작 현관문 같지 않아요?
네.
여기서부터 시작한 것 같아. 여기 항아리를. 그래서
네.
여기 집 아니라고 생각하죠.
야.
여기서 우리 한 집으로 들어가는 정도.
그러니까요. 저는 이런 골목길 보면은
네.
꼭 들어가 보고 싶어요.
네.
An alleyway like this was common in all neighborhoods back in the day.
팔만 뻗으면
네.
닿을 것 같은
네.
그런 좁은 간격의 골목길이에요. 전 이런 길을 참 처음 보는 것 같아요.
정원이 정원이라고 보시면 돼요. 이렇게 화분도 나져 있고
네.
생활 도구도 나와 있어요.
아니,
그냥 본인들이 손으로 이렇게
그러니까.
조금 더.
시멘트 이렇게
네,
다 섞어갖고 그 납작한 걸로 해서 이렇게
맞아요.
발라서 이렇게 다 일일이
그나마
사람 손으로 해갖고 다.
돈 있으면 이렇게 보수를 또 했던 집이라고 보시면 돼요.
Back in those days, everyone from the house in front to the one behind and beside was like a neighborly family. Yangji Village still retains much of that old charm. These alleys filled with traces of life should be remembered and documented by someone so that in the future, when we long for this scenery, we can revisit those memories. This reinforces my belief that recording the connections between today and tomorrow is truly important. As I passed through the alley and climbed the stairs, I soon reached a spot where I could see the entire view of Yangji Village.
여기 행운해 볼 수 있는 이 풍경을 좀 기록을 사진으로 좀 남겨놓으면 좋을 것 같아요.
Just like that, I captured a glimpse of a moment in Noanggu.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korean lawmakers began a National Assembly hearing this morning regarding the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang. But the company's founder, Kim Bum-seok, did not attend the hearing, citing business commitments. National Security Advisor Ri Sung-nak has arrived in Washington and said he plans to discuss Seoul's push to build nuclear-powered submarines with U.S. officials. Ri is also seeking to discuss the possibility of restarting talks with North Korea. And the South Korean film No Other Choice, directed by Park Chan-wook, has been named a preliminary nominee for an Oscar in the International Feature Film category. Meanwhile, the song Golden from Netflix animated hit K-pop Demon Hunters was also shortlisted for Best Original Song. We begin this morning with a National Assembly hearing that's just begun into one of South Korea's largest ever personal data breaches, involving e-commerce giant Coupang and the leaking of information belonging to millions of users. But with the company's founder refusing to appear, questions are already being raised about accountability. Our Bunyeon has the latest.
South Korea's National Assembly opened a hearing on Wednesday into the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang, which exposed the personal information of an estimated 33.7 million users. The hearing is being held by the Assembly's Science, ICT, Broadcasting and Communications Committee amid concerns that it may fall short of public expectations. Coupang founder and chairman Kim Bum-seok, along with former CEO Park Dae-jun, were summoned as witnesses, but both are absent. Kim submitted a written explanation citing overseas residence and global business commitments, while Park resigned just a week before the hearing. Kim's continued absence has renewed criticism over gaps in Assembly oversight, as his foreign nationality makes it difficult to deliver a summons or enforce compulsory attendance orders. In response, the Democratic Party lawmaker has proposed an amendment to the National Assembly's testimony law, allowing lawmakers to request an entry ban on foreign witnesses who refuse to attend hearings without a valid reason. Instead of Kim and Park, newly appointed Coupang executives, including its new U.S. national CEO, are attending, fueling criticism that senior decision-makers are once again avoiding direct accountability. The committee also added the CEO of Coupang Eats Services to the witness list just one day before the hearing. Lawmakers are expected to question executives on how the breach occurred, the company's data security practices, internal oversight, and who should ultimately bear responsibility. They will also examine whether Coupang's systems and response were adequate given the scale of the leak. A month on, anxiety among users remains high, with many reporting suspicious phone calls and messages, raising fears that leaked data is already being used for scams. A separate National Assembly petition is also gaining traction, calling for Kim's permanent entry ban into South Korea. Despite the breach, Coupang has limited its response to basic prevention guidelines and simplified account deletion, without announcing a concrete compensation plan. With public trust on the line, pressure is mounting on Coupang to move beyond explanations and present a clear plan for accountability and customer compensation. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Top security advisor Ri Sung-nak has arrived in the U.S. and announced that he would discuss concluding a separate agreement with Washington to building nuclear-powered submarines. He also expressed a strong commitment to bilateral cooperation and said that now is the opportunity for dialogue with North Korea. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
National Security Advisor Ri Sung-nak arrived in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday for talks on the implementation of agreements reached by the leaders of South Korea and the United States and strengthening coordination on North Korea policy. Speaking to reporters, he raised the possibility of a separate South Korea-U.S. agreement related to the construction of nuclear-powered submarines. Asked what such an agreement could look like, Ri pointed to Australia as an example.
Australia was granted an exception under Section 91 of the US Atomic Energy Act, and that would require a separate agreement between the two countries. We may also need that, so we will discuss the possibility.
We suggested South Korea could similarly explore a separate agreement with Washington that would allow it to work around restrictions in the existing South Korea-U.S. nuclear cooperation agreement, which prohibits the military use of nuclear materials. We said it remains unclear whether the two sides will now see creation of a formal consultative body on nuclear-powered submarines. While there is no agreement to establish issue-specific working groups, he said both sides are seeking ways to speed up consultations. We also emphasized close policy coordination on North Korea. He said he does not believe the issue is low on Washington's list of priorities, adding that while Seoul has made progress in stabilizing relations with regional powers, inter-Korean relations have lagged, and now there is an opportunity to make progress.
Isn't it true that a favourable atmosphere has formed between South Korea and the US among its various allies? If it's an opportunity, it's an opportunity. With this, North Korea relations must also be managed well. Therefore, coordination and cooperation between South Korea and the US are always crucial.
Wee is also scheduled to visit New York for talks with United Nations officials before returning to South Korea. 이승재, Arirang News.
So the National Security Advisor is in Washington for follow-up talks on the joint fact sheet, outlining details of trade and security agreements between the two countries. For more on this, we're joined today by Matthew David Jenkins, an associate professor at the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Professor Jenkins, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So the National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak said he would discuss concluding a separate agreement with Washington to build nuclear-powered submarines. How do you think the talks will play out?
Yeah, so under existing agreements, the 123 agreement, Korea is not allowed to use nuclear fuel for military purposes. So they're going to have to figure out a way to make an agreement that allows Korea to do that. I expect that the details will be pretty technical, highly technical, and not something that's going to be any major announcements coming soon. But I think that a bigger issue underlying this, though, is where they're going to build the submarine. Korea is going on the assumption that it's going to be built in Korea. The United States is going on the assumption that it's going to be built in the United States, right, in the Philadelphia shipyard. So I think that will be another sticking point that it would be great to see if they can move forward on that to figure out where it's actually going to be built. So.
Right, and as part of a joint venture aimed at strengthening supply chain ties between Seoul and Washington, Korea Zinc will build a $7 billion plant in the United States, to produce key metals and minerals. And many analysts see this as a U.S. effort to sort of form critical mineral partnerships that are not dependent on China. Could this also be on the agenda when we is in Washington? And what's your take on this?
Yeah, I actually think this is less about the decoupling strategy, like trying to move away from the Chinese supply chain networks. I think this is, from the U.S. perspective, it's more about kind of a way of pursuing industrial policy domestically, right, to show that America is going to increase its manufacturing sector, right, and to actually start to build things again. That's a part of that supply chain, right, a part of that process. So that's kind of how I see it from the United States perspective. Like, for comparison, the United States also concluded an agreement with Japan, which is a much more extensive agreement that covers a variety of rare earth minerals, and that's sort of more of a better example of that. So I think from the U.S. perspective, yeah, it's more about domestic policy. And from the Korean perspective, it's about showing compliance, right? Showing almost like an over-compliance, right? In order to, sort of shore up its relationship with the United States. Perhaps from Korea's perspective, it could use this as leverage in further negotiations for different topics, such as the topic like the submarine issue there, the nuclear fuel agreement. And so that's kind of how I would see it from Korea's perspective, rather than seeing it. I mean, certainly it is going to contribute to the U.S.'s strategic move away from the Chinese supply chain, but I see it as more of a limited diplomatic move from Korea's perspective, and more of a domestic policy move from the United States perspective.
I see. And regarding North Korea, the Trump administration repeatedly said, it hopes to resume face-to-face diplomacy with Kim Jong-un, and we is seeking to discuss this issue while he's in Washington. What are your thoughts on the possibility of talks between Pyongyang and Washington?
Yeah, I would say not a huge chance of that happening right at the moment. It certainly is possible. Both the United States and Pyongyang want some kind of process. They would love to have to show that they are engaging and making progress on the issue. From the U.S. perspective, right, they want to make progress on the denuclearization issue. From the North Korea perspective, they want recognition, improve their diplomatic status internationally. But I just don't see a great need right now. North Korea has since 2018, right? In 2018, that was a much different situation. Denuclearization was still was more potential for that. And right now, North Korea has pretty much abandoned that, and having nuclear weapons is a fundamental part of the regime's legitimacy. And so I think the two are inseparable. And so I don't see much like progress in that respect, even though formally, right, the United States that's the main reason to have dialogue with North Korea, right, is to get nuclear weapons out of the peninsula. So given that's a pretty big gap, right? And I don't see that, I don't see much room for progress. Maybe there might be some superficial sort of like announcement of working level talk, like lower level meetings and things like this, just to show that we haven't forgotten about this issue, right? But I don't see much happening. From Korea's perspective, I would think that this is, Korea doesn't want to be left out, right? They were kind of like more of a passive partner in the 2018 talks. And they were sort of forced to accept whatever came out of those meetings. And so I would hope that Mr. Wee would use this as an opportunity to sort of shape the agenda and make sure that Korea is at least included in those whatever discussions happen, that it shapes it some way.
Right. And the Korean government also said that it will focus on resuming dialogue with North Korea next year. What's your take on the prospects for inter-Korean talks?
Yeah, so similar situation here, except that, Korea kind of needs these talks, or, in a sense, right? North Korea doesn't really need them as much. Obviously, diplomacy with South Korea is important, but North Korea has moved, closer to Russia, closer to China. Again, as I said earlier, abandoned the idea of getting rid of nuclear weapons, and so it's unclear what North Korea has to gain from engaging with South Korea in a real, like, substantive way. On the other side, South Korea would certainly love to make some progress in bridging the gap between the two countries, particularly in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, right? And North Korea deploying troops, and these kinds of issues are kind of reaching not a boiling point, but certainly creating tension. And so it would love to relieve that tension. But I would say that, North Korea is probably like, I don't really care. I'm not so interested, right? So I again, similar thing, right? There might be symbolic, like low-level talks, but I would be pretty surprised if they announce like major, like high-level summits at this point.
Right. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Jenkins, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The Lee Jae-myung administration is continuing its live policy briefings after the president explained his decision to air the briefings live following mixed reactions. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
As government ministries and agencies enter the second week of policy progress briefings now being broadcast live for the first time, President Lee Jae-myung says change may bring friction, but it is worth the effort.
공무원들 입장에서는 새로운 방식에 익숙하지 않을 수도 있고 또 예년과 같은 형태로 업무 보고하면 아마 편할 수도 있을 겁니다. 그런데 정책 과정이 투명하게 검증돼야 되고 또 그 과정에서 집단 지성이 모여야 정책에 대한 신뢰도도.
Lee made the remarks at Tuesday's cabinet meeting as opinions remain divided over the live broadcast. Supporters say the move strengthens transparency and the public's right to know, while critics argue it risks turning policy reviews into excessive discipline or public shaming. Appearing to address those concerns, the president said the new format reflects his administration's principle that the government exists to serve the people.
국정이 이 국정의 주체인 국민들에게 투명하게 공개돼야 국민 중심 국정 운영이라는 게 말에 그치지 않고 제대로 될 수가 있습니다.
On Tuesday, the Culture Ministry held its policy briefing alongside the Ministries of Health and Food and Drug Safety. President Lee stressed the importance of the arm's length principle in the government's relationship with the arts.
일부는 또 각광을 받긴 하지만 압도적 다수는 그러지 못한 게 또 현실입니다. 개인적인 삶으로 끝나는 게 아니고 공공 영역에 영향을 미치고 사람들의 삶을 풍요롭게 풍족하게 만들죠. 그리고 세세하게 정말 구석구석 지원하되 간섭하지 않으면서도.
In line with this, the Culture Ministry plans to strengthen livelihood support measures for artists, such as offering low-interest, small loans. 송유진, Arirang News.
Now, on the economic front, a survey of business activities is a key indicator for corporate sales. Last year, the total sales of South Korean companies increased, driven by strong performance in the chip industry. Our An Sung-jin has the details.
Earnings for South Korean companies in 2024 increased on the back of a semiconductor boom. According to the Data Ministry on Tuesday, total sales from the 2024 survey of business activities, made up of nearly 15,000 companies and excludes the financial and insurance sector, reached 3,371.1 trillion won, or $2.28 trillion US dollars. That's a 5.2% increase from the year before. In particular, net profit before corporate tax surged by 20.6%. An official from the Data Ministry said that the chip industry, which suffered a downturn in 2023, played a key role in pushing the figure before corporate tax amid the global AI boom. The Trade Ministry had earlier stated that South Korea's semiconductor exports totaled $141.9 billion last year, the highest level on record. Average sales per company also rose. By industry, sales saw a hike in scientific and technical services, transportation and warehousing, and accommodation and food services. Meanwhile, sales declined in construction and the electricity and gas supply sector. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
A South Korean private space company is set to attempt its first commercial rocket launch early Thursday. Innospace will launch its small rocket Hanbin-naru from Brazil's Alcantara Space Center, carrying a payload of 5 mini-satellites and 3 other instruments to an altitude of about 300 kilometers above the Earth. If successful, it'll mark the first time a South Korean private firm has placed customer satellites into a low Earth orbit. The launch will be live-streamed on YouTube, with the rocket expected to release its payload about 7.5 minutes after liftoff. Director Park Chan-wook's film No Other Choice has been named a preliminary nominee for an Oscar in the International Feature Film category. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences announced a shortlist for 12 categories on Tuesday, ahead of the 98th Academy Awards. In the International Feature Film category, 15 films were selected from submissions, representing 86 countries and regions, including South Korea. Also shortlisted was the song Golden from Netflix animated film K-pop Demon Hunters for Best Original Song. Final nominees will be announced on January 22nd, with the Academy Awards set to take place on March 15th.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In the United States, Los Angeles prosecutors charged Nick Reiner, the son of filmmaker Rob Reiner, with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the killing of his parents. District Attorney Nathan Hochman announced the charges at a news conference on Tuesday, saying prosecutors will also pursue special circumstances for multiple murders and allege Reiner used a knife in the attack. Police found Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner dead from apparent stab wounds inside their Los Angeles home on Sunday. Officers arrested Nick Reiner several hours later, and he is now being held without bail. He has not entered a plea, and authorities have not disclosed a motive. Director Rob Reiner was best known for films such as When Harry Met Sally and A Few Good Men. Michelle Singer Reiner was a photographer and LGBTQ+ rights advocate. In Australia, newly released Dashcam footage captured the final moments of a couple who confronted a gunman moments before the deadly mass shooting at Sydney's Bondi Beach. The footage released on Tuesday shows 69-year-old Boris Gurman wrestling a suspected attacker to the ground on Campbell Parade and briefly taking the gun as his wife, Sophia Gurman, stood nearby. CNN verified the video and confirmed the confrontation occurred just meters from where the shooter later opened fire at a Hanukkah event. Australian media identified the Gurmans as the first victims of the rampage that killed at least 15 people. Both died at the scene. Family members said the couple acted instinctively to protect others. Police later recovered an ISIS flag displayed on the attacker's vehicle. Authorities continue to investigate the attack. In the United States, newly released government data on Tuesday showed a sharp labor market slowdown, with layoffs creeping up and the hiring rate remaining at lows, similar to the pandemic and the aftermath of the Great Recession. The economy lost 105,000 jobs in October, but added 64,000 jobs in November. The unemployment rate in November rose to 4.6%, the highest level since 2021. Officials attributed the October losses largely to federal workforce reductions following Trump administration cutbacks. Economists also pointed to uncertainty from tariffs and persistently high interest rates. The Federal Reserve cut rates last week but signaled caution, with policymakers divided over further easing. In the United Kingdom, a Liverpool court on Tuesday sentenced a driver who plowed into a celebrating crowd to 21 years and 6 months in prison. Paul Doyle drove into a crowd during the May 26th parade celebrating Liverpool's Premier League title win. He injured more than 130 people before a bystander forced the vehicle to stop. Prosecutors said Doyle acted in rage after becoming stuck in traffic. The 54-year-old pleaded guilty to 31 charges, including dangerous driving and causing grievous bodily harm. The judge rejected Doyle's claim of panic and praised the bystander whose intervention prevented further injuries.
It was a rough morning commute for much of the capital area with damp roads and thick fog. And on top of that, stagnant air is trapping pollutants, making conditions even murkier. Ultrafine dust is expected to reach bad levels across the capital area throughout the day today. Rain or snow continues through the morning on Jeju, then to the east coast later today. Mountainous regions in Gangwon province could pick up 1 to 3 centimeters of snowfall. Morning temperatures were 2 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday, but daytime highs are lower in much places. Seoul getting up to 7 degrees, Gyeongju, Gwangju at 10 degrees under brighter skies in most places. Colder air moves back in overnight, bringing sub-zero temperatures tomorrow morning before rebounding to above the season norms. Then winter rain is expected across much of the country this weekend.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
Korea, a globally recognized sports powerhouse. Behind the dazzling achievements, there's always an invisible force at work. With sophisticated materials, cutting-edge equipment, and innovative technological solutions, SMEs in the K-sports industry play a vital role in bolstering Korea's status as a sports powerhouse. By integrating AI technology, they unlock athletes' potential and enhance performance, elevating the sports environment to the next level and opening new markets in the sports industry. Their innovative technology and bold challenges drive the growth of Korea's sports industry, creating a better world through sports. The innovation of these SMEs never stops. A systematic partnership support program is implemented to discover promising sports SMEs, provide technical validation and R&D support to enhance competitiveness, and strengthen the foundation for overseas expansion. At Tokyo Sportech 2025, the technological prowess of Korean companies was recognized. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and the Korea Sports Promotion Foundation supported K-sports companies with product promotion and business consultations with global buyers, demonstrating product quality and market potential, and confirming the possibility of expanding into the global market.
저희는 ICT 강국으로서 그 바이어나 사용자들한테 신기술을 접목한 생활 스포츠 기회를 실질적으로 확대할 수 있는 그 기회를 제공하는 데 많은 도움이 될 수 있으리라고 확신을 합니다.
이제 스포츠도 K죠. K 스포츠는 이겁니다.
The joy for all, created by the power of K-sports. Experience the future of the new sports industry through the innovation and technology of the Korean sports industry.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you is Wednesday, December 17th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Grace.
Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Also, Brooke is with us.
Hello, great to be here.
Great to have you. Both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're right in the middle of the week when energy is slightly low and the days can start to blur together. So whether you're rushing through last-minute plans or just trying to power through the workday, there's one simple comfort food that can instantly lift the mood. So that brings us to today's topic, one of my favorite things in the world, bread. So from cozy neighborhood bakeries to viral pastries all over social media, bread has become more than just a quick snack here in Korea. So here's a question to kick off this discussion. So just how popular is bread in South Korea these days? And on a personal note, do you like baked goods like bread and pastries, Grace?
Honestly, I was never really like a bread fanatic, but that's all changed after I got pregnant, and now I understand why people go crazy over baked goods. And I've especially been eating Korean-style breads like hotdog, which is like a pancake with melted brown sugar filling inside, and 꽈배기, which is basically like a twisted donut. And if you've been in Korea before, you've probably tried or maybe even seen the street stalls that sell these widely loved bread menus, which also change with the seasons, like hotdog and 붕어빵, which is like a fish-shaped bread with red bean paste inside. They're usually available in the winter time. So right now it's like a perfect time to try them. And I feel like I'm becoming more and more of like a 빵순이, which can be described into English as a girl who loves bread and pastries.
So as a fellow 빵순이, hearing you describe all these foods already making me hungry. So what about you, Bron?
Yeah, you know, that was one of the first Korean slang words I learned was bangsun이, because my Korean friend called me that after seeing how much I just love bread and baked goods. And, you know, on our last show, I got to try delicious Korean snacks, and today I get to talk about Korean bread. So I'm feeling very, very lucky. Some of my favorites include hotdog, definitely delicious. I also really like mammoth bread, which I've only ever seen here. It has like brioche bread, soboro topping, it has jam, cream, chestnut. It's this mix of textures and flavors that is just very uniquely Korean and so delicious. But really, if you go to any cafe here in Korea, you can just find a huge assortment of pastries, and I love them all.
So I'm kind of surprised you like the red bean paste filling, because I feel like that's like not as popular among international customers.
I'd never tried it before I came to Korea, but I quickly fell in love with it.
So there's so many different types of Korean bread that's available. So we're going to dive deeper into this topic, but first let's take a look at the screen. When people think of must-visit places in Korea, historic palaces often come to mind. But beyond the landmarks, there's another destination many travelers put at the top of their list: Korea's cafes. And a big reason for that is what's inside the display cases: baked goods. Bread may not be a traditional Korean food, but it has quickly evolved into one of the country's most successful dessert categories, standing out not just for its quality, but for its creative designs and wide range of flavors. Today on News Generation, we're taking a closer look at the rise of Korean bread, from uniquely Korean creations to the bakers truly worth lining up for. So as we just saw in a video, Korean bread is no longer just popular at home, and by extension, Korean bread brands are becoming key players in the global K-culture wave. So we've been seeing Korean bakery brands popping up overseas. Like, I left in the States when it was 2018. I still saw a lot of famous Korean bread brands there. So how popular would you say Korean brands are doing?
Yeah, I mean, K-bread brands are achieving consistent success overseas, now establishing themselves as leaders in the Korean cultural phenomenon spreading across the globe. And major brands that were once only household names here in Korea are rapidly expanding their store counts all over Asia, including China and Vietnam, and are also gaining significant popularity in the North American market. And with this momentum, market insiders anticipate continued growth in Korean bakery sales. Now, if you take a look at the screen, we can see that Korean bakery sales recorded $8.3 billion this year and is projected to reach $10.2 billion by 2030, with an estimated 4.19 average annual growth rate until then. And I was actually able to witness the popularity of K-baked goods myself when I visited home in the US earlier this year, and I saw all of the Korean famous bakeries in my hometown. So that was really interesting.
That is really interesting. So you said earlier that you also enjoy K-bread. So what do you think is about like these Korean bread and bakeries that's resonating so much with customers overseas?
Well, I think that video said it all. It made me very hungry. I think I'm going to have to stop by a cafe for brunch later. But I think one of the key reasons why Korean bread is so popular here and overseas is just the sheer amount of variety. As you saw in the video, there are so many different designs and types of pastries that you can try. There are in fact more than 200 different types of bread that you can find at Korean bakeries, from simple pastries to much more elaborate desserts. Some of them have cute little faces on them. They make characters, as you're seeing now, these beautiful flowers. And cakes in particular are definitely a highlight. You'll often see them brought to birthday parties or work parties called hwaesik here in Korea. And again, they're very intricate and they're also delicious. Many of them are much lighter than desserts that we are used to as well. In America, for example, cakes tend to be quite heavy and rich, but in Korea, you'll often find cakes that are made of fresh cream and strawberries, so they're a little bit lighter and more refreshing. And when we look at Southeast Asia, many bakeries mainly focus on this mass-produced and packaged bread, and the US is quite similar on that front. So when you look at Korean bakeries with all this freshly baked, all these goods, it can seem like more of a premium brand. And in fact, in Ho Chi Minh City, 2 Korean bakeries were actually found to be in the city's top 10. And that really goes to show how their reputation has become stronger in recent years.
Right, so the popularity around Korean bread isn't just about the taste, but about the variety, the design, and the overall just experience that Korean bakeries are offering. And it really sounds like they're also positioning themselves as a premium brand. So to get a broader perspective on this, we'll be connecting with someone in the US who will share with us how popular Korean bread really is overseas. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Jasia, a fan of Korean baked goods, who's joining us from the US. Hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So from what you've seen, how popular are Korean baked goods in the US right now?
So I'm currently living in Virginia, in the Fairfax area, and there's like 3 Koreatowns in my area. So typically when people say, let's go to a bakery, the default is actually a Korean bakery. But I think even outside of this area, pretty much everyone knows what Paris baguette is at this point. A whole bunch of them popped up in my hometown, which is like near Boston. And I think before, when I was in middle school and high school, people were confused about like the brands Paris baguette and Twitter, and they thought like, oh, is this like French? What is this? This doesn't really taste like every other pastry I've had. But at this point, everyone knows that they're Korean brands, but that's kind of exciting to people, and they're really looking to try it out, especially with like the Korean wave and people being more curious about like what these types of breads entail.
Oh, that's really cool to hear, Jitsia. Then what sets Korean bread apart from others? And why do you think it's gained so much popularity?
I think Korean bread is definitely very palatable to the diverse audiences in America. Since America has so many different cultures within the country, Korean bread just kind of fits the international palate a lot. I asked a lot of my friends about this, like my roommates who are from the Middle East. They told me that it tastes a lot more similar to something that they would have in their home country, since it's less sweet than a typical American bread. And so I think people like, and some of my other friends said that like people who are older or need lower sugar intake would appreciate Korean breads more because of that same reason. So the fact that Korean pastry breads are less sweet and they taste a lot lighter and fluffy really attract a lot of international audiences. And then American audiences who are more used to like more dense or sugary breads are very interested in trying out the flavor, and they think it's like a fascinating new taste. I think also just Korean breads being very fluffy and like they have a lot of creams. I think that's what makes it very unique. When I was in Korea, I always remember seeing everything had like whipped cream inside, or like it was very buttery. And I thought that that was really unique because despite having all those different toppings, it always tasted like very light, and I didn't feel like I was eating that much sugar. So I felt like I could eat a lot at a time without feeling too guilty about it.
Well, I actually lived in Virginia well over 10 years now, and I don't recall seeing any Korean bakeries. So it's really cool to hear that now in this day and age, it's different. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now, my last question for you is, do you have a personal favorite Korean baked good? And is there one that you'd especially recommend?
Yeah, definitely. I think within the US, one of the most easy ones to find is Dampapang. And it has like red bean filling. So it's really great because it has like the typical fluffy bread on the outside that tastes like all the other Korean breads, but you get that really like unique type of red bean, which is not too sweet, and you kind of feel like you're being healthier since it's like bean based. And then I also like within Korea, I love bungeoppang and hotteok the most. And so those are a lot harder to find in the US, but if you ever get the chance to try them, I think they're popping up in some more local cafes since everyone wants to try Korean goods. Definitely try it since they're crispy and they're very, very sweet.
Kind of reiterate what Brooke just said. I think it's really cool that bread like dampapang, like the red bean with the red bean filling, is becoming more common in the States. That's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just spoke to someone in the US who gave us insight into why Korean baked goods are becoming increasingly popular, what makes them stand out from local options. So we've talked about their global expansion, but there's another side of Korean bread that's also drawing attention, ones that are actually uniquely Korean. So Brooke, what are some traditional or uniquely Korean breads that have been getting a lot of attention these days?
Well, it's cold outside now, and I would say Korean bread culture includes many items that are particularly popular in winter. We've talked about hotteok today, but there are also steamed buns like hoppang or jinbang, and then fish-shaped pastries. We've talked about them today too. bungeoppang, very delicious and comforting when it's cold outside. And traditionally, these breads are filled with sweet red bean paste, but today you can also find many different alternatives. You can find more savory options like cheese fillings or vegetables, or an alternative sweet option like custard cream. And another popular street food that you're seeing right now that I really want to talk about is keranbang. It is egg bread, one of my favorites. And actually, when my little brother visited Korea many years ago now, he loved it so much that to this day he still talks about it, and he's still trying to recreate it in his own kitchen, but he says he just can't quite capture the magic of the authentic Korean egg bread. And in fact, this yummy snack is popular overseas as well. It gained international recognition recently when CNN selected it as one of the top 50 breads in the world. So again, if you get the chance to try some genuine, authentic Korean keranbang, definitely do so.
So real quick, what would you say is your favorite
street food bread?
Right.
Definitely keranbang.
Keranbang, I think it's a classic.
Delicious.
Right. I think another great thing about these breads is that they're also very affordable and they're easy to find during winter.
So less than $1 off.
Right. Yeah. So there are other types of these K bread that's become really popular and more their regional specialties. So can you describe some of them for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, there are really well-loved breads like 꽈배기, hotteok, and there are lots of great regional specialties too. For example, Cheonan, it's known for its 호두과자, which is like a soft walnut cookie, and Tongyeong is also popular for its 꿀빵 or honey bread. Jeonju has its own rendition of choco pie, which is also the same name for a famous chocolate-flavored pie made by a major confectionery company. In fact, at the recent APEC summit in Gyeongju, Chinese President Xi Jinping was said to have enjoyed Gyeongju's hwangnam-bang, which is a sweet pastry made from flour, egg, and red bean paste. And because of this, hwangnam-bang has gathered popularity among visitors.
So that really shows how bread in Korea goes beyond bakeries. It's tied to regions and even current events. So if we were to sum it up, is there a distinct characteristic that you'd say kind of would describe Korean bread, Grace?
Yeah, I mean, unlike many other countries, bread is considered to be more of like a dessert in Korea rather than a main dish, which here, of course, is rice. And that's why we see more sweet pastry-like items rather than plain breads like baguettes or ciabatta. And Koreans also really like adding sweet fillings to the middle of these breads. And this is called anko, which is usually in the form of sweet red bean paste or cream or even vegetables and cheese, like Brooke mentioned. And these days, a mix of sweet and salty flavors, or danjan, is also really popular. So we're seeing more bakeries come up with menus that follow these types of consumer trends.
I think that's a really good point. I didn't really think of this, but because I guess it's such a dessert, and bread is like considered a dessert, there's so much more focus on like the sweetness or like the different types of fillings as well. So how does it compare to how bread is being viewed in the US where you're from or Europe?
Well, it's interesting because in America, when we say bread, we think of the sliced bread that you use to make a sandwich. So I was kind of confused when I first came to Korea and I learned the word bang because everyone used that word to refer to baked goods and pastries. So I very quickly learned that it's kind of an all-encompassing word for all of my favorite things, aka carbs. Something just made of bread, and there are so many different options, varieties, flavors to choose from. We talked about the sort of sweet and salty danjan flavor earlier, and that could be a hit with some people, but for some international consumers, it can be a little bit polarizing. For example, I want to talk about pizza bread. So there was a French guest on a Korean TV show, and there was a clip where he was talking about how much he adores Korean food, but he just can't get behind pizza bread. And the reason why is because Koreans kind of do something interesting with pizza where they'll add ingredients that we're not really quite familiar with in the States, like corn or mayonnaise to the pizza, and it's kind of a little bit sweeter. So that doesn't always land with everyone. Personally, I love pizza bread. What do you guys think?
I like it too.
I do too.
I quite like it, yeah.
I think it's interesting, a little bit of sweetness there. But again, if that flavor is not for you, we said earlier, 200 different kinds of bread that you can choose from.
So I think that's a really good example and kind of sums up the Korean bread experience, where it can be a bit surprising and also a bit elaborate. And that's what makes it so uniquely Korean. And it's also a testament to the broad range of options that are available. So we also wanted to know what you think too. So we asked on the Arirang News YouTube channel, what is your favorite Korean style winter bread? Here's what the results showed. The steamed buns, or Coupang, ranked as the most popular choice at 41%, followed closely by 붕어빵, the fish-shaped pastry also known as 잉어빵, at 39%. Egg bread came in third with 14%, while other options accounted for the remaining 6%. So what stands out here is that the top choices are all warm, nostalgic street foods, especially ones people tend to associate with winter. So this implies how Korean bread isn't just about the taste, but also comfort and also seasonal memories as well, as they tend to pop up every winter. So to close off our discussion today, Grace, can you share some of our your favorite bakeries?
Sure. I mean, there's just so much. Even within Seoul, I'm sure there are like thousands of bakeries here. But I also recommend going to the local bakeries in other popular regions outside of Seoul, like in Gwangju or Busan, because there are really innovative and wonderful bakeries in places outside of the capital area. And you'll be surprised to see that, you'll see huge long lines at these other local bakeries outside of Seoul, made up of bread lovers from all over the country. So I definitely recommend trying those out.
And like the bakery cafes outside in the outskirts of Seoul are also really usually bigger as well.
They're bigger, they're more spacious, there's more parking.
It's a whole experience. So what about you, Brooke? What are your recommendations?
Well, I always have to recommend this very famous bakery in Daejeon. I used to live in Daejeon for about 6 months, and in that 6 months, I think I gained 5 kilos or 10 pounds solely because of this bakery. It is phenomenal. The best pastries I have ever had. So I would say run, don't walk to Daejeon. There's a KTX that will get you there within an hour. I have gone just for the day. Get pastries from this place. I want to recommend their fried soburo. They have different varieties like goguma, which is sweet potato, the red bean paste we've been talking about, and then one, if you're really feeling just decadent, chocolate covered with red bean paste inside. That one is my my personal favorite, my favorite pastry I've ever tried. So if you get the chance to visit Daejeon, because I do think it's important we highlight places outside of Seoul as well. Gwangju, Busan, Daejeon, all of these places have wonderful bakeries. But if you're just visiting Seoul, again, every corner will have a cafe with something delicious for you to eat.
So I will be visiting Daejeon in around 2 weeks, so I will.
I'm so jealous.
I will check that bakery out. So from street stalls to global storefronts, Korean bread shows how even everyday food can carry culture, creativity, and comfort. So whether it's a nostalgic winter snack or a trendy pastry, Korean bread is clearly carving out its own place on the global stage. So whether you reach for a classic hoppang, a crispy 붕어빵, or a trendy pastry, one thing is clear: Korean bread has grown into a global trend, proving that Korean bread has a flavor and identity all its own. So that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Grace.
Thanks for having me.
Coming in also Brooke.
Thank you for making me hungry.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have the best day. We are News Generation.
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace, or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
dramas and audition shows, one of the characters we can't help but root for is the growth arc. Now, they may start off as clumsy or unsure, but as they push past their limits one by one, watching them prove themselves in the end makes us cheer on with our whole hearts. Hi Crunchers, I'm your DJ Chihi, and this is Culture Crunch. Now today on Tune In Time, we'll be joined by someone whose journey of growth we are especially excited to follow. Well, let's meet our guest right after our first song. Here is 하기나 해 Just Do It by Gray featuring Loco.
영원하길 바래 지금의 젊음과 힘 또 영감과 느낌 계속 오래가길 바래 다들 영원한 건 없다고 말하지만 영원하길 바래 사랑하는 사람들과 돈과 명예 음악 내 자신에게 말해 쓸데없는 생각 그만하고 하기나 해 그냥 하기나 해 뭐든지 걱정만 많으면 잘 될 것도 되다